About to leave, already packing. Come with me, I'm not really asking. We'll get away to a place where we don't know. About to see the world in action, what we can be, life with no distractions. We'll get away, this is what we waited for. Take my hand, we'll make it somehow. We can't miss out. I'm done living life with the lights out. Die with my own doubts. Be free with me. Let's go, let's be free with me. Be free. Not looking back, eyes on the freeway, Bonnie and Clyde, a classic cliche. We're on the run, this is what we waited for. Take my hand, we'll make it somehow. We can't miss out. I'm done living life with the lights out. Die with my own doubts. Be free.
Evening, everyone. Jim here at Tutor to You. Welcome to our latest live GCSE Geography revision session. Suzanne and Jacob joining me tonight for a look at hot deserts. Almost got it wrong. Suzanne and Jacob were telling me it is the most commonly misspelt word in geography. And
indeed it is.
But we got it right tonight. So last week, of course, we looked at the challenge of cold environments. So I'm guessing, I'm no expert, as you know, but I'm guessing quite different.
We can get rid of the scarves to the woolly hat tonight.
Good. That's good news. Anyway, we've got about sort of 35, 40 minutes of activities to have a go at. If you're joining us live, have a go in the live chat window if you wish. Quite fast-paced for the live audience. We've had hundreds and hundreds of students work their way through the replays of these sessions in the last week or two. So that's likely to be you. So, of course, you can pause the video if you wish. You might be working collaboratively or possibly within the classroom environment, having a go at the activities. So use the session as best you can, a chance to learn from two experts on hot deserts. So, Suzanne, Jacob, who's starting tonight? What are we starting with?
I am starting off, and then Suzanne's going to take it away with a bubble quiz.
Great stuff. Well, I'm going to have a go at the questions, and I'll see if I can come up with a suitable dad joke at the end, as always.
Brilliant.
Which gives me about half an hour. But anyway, have fun, everyone.
Thank you.
Wonderful. So we are starting off today with Challenge of Hot Deserts. This is our 7th exam skills live session. Now, for those of you that took part in last week's session on cold environments, this is one of the optional topics in Living World. So if you do cold environments, you don't necessarily study hot deserts. So most schools will just choose one or the other. So this might not be the topic for you, but a lot of people still study hot deserts out there. And today we're going to start off with a bubble quiz with Suzanne.
Right. Okay, brilliant. The bubble quiz, a great quiz where we are going to have 4 answers to the question pop up. For those of you who haven't played this before, you have to guess how many of those bubbles have the correct answer. Now, it could be that none of them have the correct answer. It could be 1's right, 2's right, 3 right. So it could be all 4 of them are correct. So let's kick off, please, Jim. Wonderful. Right. So question number 1. Hot deserts are mainly found. Is it A, outside the tropics, B, along the tropics, C, south of the equator, or D, along the equator? So if you're playing live, you can pop into the chat box the letters that you think are correct. It might be more than 1, might not be, might be all 4. So if you are playing, pop it in. If you're playing at home, you can obviously pause it and write down your answers. Right, okay, Jim, let's see this one. All right, so they are mainly found along the tropics. The other ones are incorrect. Let's go for question number 2. Which of these are hot deserts? So which ones maybe have you studied? You might have done a map of the world and sort of shaded some of these hot deserts on. Is it A, the Sahel, B, the Atacama, C, the Gobi, or D, Great Western? How many of those are hot deserts? Pop down into the chat box if you're playing live which ones you think might be hot deserts. Remember, it might be more than 1. Okay. Right. Shall we have a reveal, Jim? Okay, so it's the Atacama, Gobi, and Great Western. The Sahel is a very dry area, but it's semi-arid, and it actually is the border between. It's on the southern part of the Sahara. It touches the Sahara, and it's actually kind of a transition zone between the desert and the savannah. So it's a very, very dry area. And it's actually got some of the poorest countries in the world located in the Sahel. Right, question number 3, please. So which of these total annual rainfall amounts are typical of hot deserts? So remember, it might be 1, 2, 3, or 4 of them might be correct. So pop down which ones you think might be right. Is it A, 400 millimeters, B, 200 millimeters, C, 300 millimeters, and D, 100 millimeters? So which ones do you think might be the correct answer? I'll give you a little bit to think about that one. See what you want to pop down. Right. Okay. Can we have the answer, please, Jim? Yes. So it is there, B and D. So actually 400 and 300 millimeters would be too high to classify it as a desert. So there are deserts that receive 200 and some that have even less at 100 millimeters per year. That's their annual rainfall. Okay. Can I have the next question? So which of these is a challenge or challenges in hot deserts? A, inaccessibility, B, overpopulation, C, extreme temperatures, and D, water supply. So again, pop in the chat box if you're playing with us, which ones are correct, which letters are correct. Is it just 1, 2, 3, or 4? Oh, I can see. Don't worry, Pink. We're all here waiting for you. Right, we're going to have some answers popped in that chat box. Okay, Jim, can we have a reveal, please? Oh, well done. Yep, I can see. Fantastic. Well done. I can see in the chat box you're getting them correct there. Yes, it's inaccessibility, extreme temperatures, and water supply. Overpopulation is definitely not a challenge. It's a very, very sparsely populated area. Very few people live there. It can't support many people at all. Right, question number 5, please. Which of these adaptations are found in hot desert plants? So which ones are correct? A, large flat leaves, B, very long tap roots, C, water storage in the stems, and D, a rapid life cycle. So pop in the chat box which you think is correct. If you're playing at home, you can pause, jot down your answer. All right, what we're going to pop down here, waiting for some answers to pop in. Oh, okay. Don't worry. We'll be talking all about it later, Pink. I can see your message saying you haven't done that yet. we'll cover it tonight, so don't worry. Right, let's have a look at the answer, please. Yeah, so B, C, and D are the correct answers. Large flat leaves are not a feature of hot desert plants. Right, I think that brings me on to Jacob. I'm going to pass over and you're going to tell everybody, I think, about what they need to know.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Suzanne. So we are going to look at a lot of different things today. So we are going to be looking at where we find hot deserts, where they are distributed, and what characteristics we expect to see in a hot desert environment. We're going to look at the plants and animals that we can find in the hot deserts and how they've adapted to live in these extreme environments. We are then also going to look at some case study knowledge, and we're going to look at some challenges and some opportunities that can be found in the hot deserts. And then to finish off, we're going to explore the idea of desertification and how we can manage desertification and sort of reduce the spread of deserts in large parts of the world, which has been enhanced due to human enhanced climate change. Now, if we go on to the next slide, we'll start off with our characteristics. And I'm starting you off today. So, what are hot deserts? Well, hot deserts are areas of the world that receive very, very little rainfall, less than 250 millimeters of rainfall a year. That is incredibly dry and incredibly arid. Now, often we see that a lot of these hot deserts are found in the middle of continents due to sort of the very dry air that is sort of happens over there. A lot of the rainfall precipitates over the coastlines, and so by the time that air has moved inland, we often see it is very, very dry. Now, there are some coastal deserts, such as the Atacama Desert in Chile, South America. But that desert is dry for a very different reason. That's all to do with the rain shadow effect from the Andes Mountains. Now we can find them typically around the tropics, around 30 degrees north and 30 degrees south of the equator. Again, it's not perfect because of the natural world. Some deserts can be found a bit further north, and some deserts can be found a bit closer to the equator, but generally, if you look at a map of the distribution, they tend to be pretty much around those tropics. Now, we can link this back to one of the overarching topics that we talk about, which is global atmospheric circulation. Now, deserts are found around 30 degrees north and south because that is where we get belts of high pressure air, where we have the air that has moved from the equator descending towards the earth. So we have high air pressure, which means that very little rain actually falls. So it's that sort of end part of the Hadley cell, which goes from the equator, moves up towards 30 degrees north or 30 degrees south of the equator, high air pressure, which has got very little water moisture in, no clouds can form, and that causes that very arid environment. And because these areas are still pretty close to the equator, they still get that very high concentration of solar energy. Now, the one thing about hot deserts is that as hot as they are during the day, they can be incredibly cold at night. And this is what we call diurnal variation, a very large variation in temperatures during the day and night. Often it's very cold at night because there is no cloud cover, so all of that heat cannot be insulated and it escapes out into the atmosphere. Sometimes the temperature range can be as large as 35 degrees. Now, we are going to start our first task today, if we go to the next slide, with some analysis of data. Now, we are going to look at some climate graphs, and climate graphs are one of the things that a lot of students find very, very tricky. Now, the one thing to keep a very close eye on with these climate graphs is which axis shows precipitation and which axis shows temperature. Now we have a line here. The line is representing temperature. And as we can see, the right hand axis is showing temperature. And on the left hand, we have got precipitation, which is represented by the bars at the bottom. So what I want you to do is I want you to tell me the highest average temperature, degrees Celsius of any month. And I think we have got a timer on this one. So if we start the timer. Okay, so we are looking at Mauritania in Africa, which is part of the Sahara Desert. So we are looking at the Sahara Desert, and Pink has already been absolutely fantastic to come in with the correct answer straight away. If you are watching this on replay, do feel free to pause, grab a ruler out so you can get an accurate measurement. But having a look at that temperature, making sure you're looking at that correct axis. This is where a lot of students find themselves getting tripped up. Let's see if we get a couple more comments in the answer box. Wonderful. Okay. So we've got some fantastic answers coming through there. Okay. Remember, don't just say the temperature, say which Okay, so wonderful. Let's get the answer on the board. Fantastic. It is 33 degrees Celsius, which Pink got absolutely right. Just make sure that you always add in that month as well, just to make it extra clear. So it's 33 degrees Celsius in July. Okay, we'll move on to the next one. So the next one is, what is the highest total precipitation in millimeters of any month? So we'll start the timer this time. And here we go. Okay, so looking down at the bar chart along the bottom, remember, let's use the correct axis and make sure you are putting the units, which is millimeters of rainfall. We are looking at the same area again in Mauritania in Africa, which is a area that is covered by the Sahara Desert. Okay, remember, if you are please do feel that you can pause it, get a ruler up, wonderful thing, fantastic answers there, amazing. Okay, so again, timer, wonderful. Okay, let's get the answer up on the screen. So it is 17 millimeters. Now these ones can be a little bit tricky because obviously our precipitation is going up in 20s. So often they will give you a sort of couple of millimeters range in the exam paper. But when you have it on your exam paper, take a ruler, draw a line across to try and get the most accurate reading possible. Okay, we'll go on to our last question on the data lab. Now this one is a little bit trickier. What is the temperature range shown on the climate graph? So let's start the timer and let's see if we can have a go. The temperature range. So we are looking at the highest temperatures and we are looking at the lowest temperatures. So we know that our highest temperature is 33 degrees in July. So now we need to go to the other end, get our lowest temperature and see what the number range is between them. And remember, it wants degrees Celsius in that. So don't make sure you put degrees. We need to always have those units on. Now, this is a nice simple bit of maths, but in your real exam, please take a calculator with you. If you're ever a little bit rusty on your math, then it's Okay, let's get the answer on the screen there. Wonderful. So Pink got it absolutely amazingly right. It is 16 degrees. So we had our highest temperature of 33 degrees. And then we have our lowest one of 17 degrees. So absolutely amazing. So again, practice these little bits of data. I'm now going to hand you back across to Suzanne, who's going to take you through some of the adaptations.
Thank you. Okay, so we are looking tonight, remember, at challenges, and there's lots of environmental challenges, including in the desert, the dry conditions. So plants that can survive in very dry conditions are called xerophytes. They use a whole range of different adaptations, including thick and waxy cuticles, and they shed their leaves to reduce transpiration to minimize water loss. They have to cope with super high temperatures. So some plants have the bulk of their biomass up below the ground surface. So the majority of what's growing is actually underneath, where temperatures are much cooler. And short periods of rainfall, the desert blooms very, very suddenly. You might have seen some videos of it, literally time lapse. They kind of suddenly small amount of rain, and it is all colourful within sort of hours a day of the rainfall. And they complete their life cycle really quickly because it's going to get very, very hot and dry very quickly as that water evaporates. Cacti are what we call succulents. They store water in their tissues, and the cactus's spines deter consumer species, so things that would feed on them. And their small and very waxy leaves minimize any transpiration loss, so it stops them really from sweating out all that water. Desert flowers have seeds that can only germinate when there's very heavy rainfall, and they can lie dormant for years and years in between the rains. They're called ephemerals. What's the word for those? Ephemeral, when they wait and wait until they get the water. And they can complete their life cycle in less than a month. And they make sure they disperse lots of seeds that are going to stay there, waiting for the next rains. Plants immediately produce very brightly coloured flowers to attract insects, of course, because they need to pollinate. Finally, some of the plants have horizontal root systems, and they spread out to get as much water as possible when it does rain. Others have very long tap roots, so roots that reach right down deep into the soil between 7 to 10 meters below the surface to get to the groundwater that's stored beneath. Right, if we can go to the next slide, please, Jim. Thank you. Okay, so adapting to hot deserts, the animals. Look how cute that little fox is. I love the fennec fox. I think they've got super cool ears. Right, so despite the harsh conditions, there are many species of animal in the desert that have had to adapt to survive to such a hostile environment. Many of the rodents are nocturnal, so they survive the extremely high daytime temperatures by living in burrows underground, where we've already heard it is slightly cooler underground, and they only venture out during those much cooler nights. Snakes and lizards can retain water by having a waterproof skin, and they produce only tiny amounts of urine, so they don't perspire at all. Kangaroo rats do not need to drink any water at all. They've adapted so they can actually get all their water needs from food. And again, they live in the burrows during the day to avoid the extreme heat and come out at night. Again, they don't perspire either and have highly efficient kidneys that produce very little urine. So the idea is just don't let any water escape from your body. Fennec foxes, there we go, that one, they're sleeping. They have very thick fur on the soles of their feet, which help protects them from the hot ground so they don't burn their paws. The very light coloured fur on their body actually helps to reflect the sunlight, so it keeps them a little bit cooler. And the massive ears that they've got are actually to help them with heat loss. So that's where they manage to lose some of their heat so they can keep themselves at a reasonable temperature to survive. And finally, our camels. I'm sure lots of you have maybe labelled some pictures of camels with their adaptations. They're known as the ships of the desert, and probably the most famous of all desert animals. They've got many adaptations which can help them survive in the desert because they store fat in their humps, meaning that they can go without food for long periods of time. Now, that's something that a lot of pupils often have a misconception, that the camels' humps are full of water. They're not, it's fat, but they can use that when they don't have enough food for those very long periods of time as they're perhaps traversing over the desert. They have very concentrated urine. So just like those kangaroo rats, they produce very little urine and feces, so they don't lose a lot of water that way. They've also got 2 pairs of eyelashes. So yeah, that sounds quite good. Very long eyelashes to protect their eyes from the bright sun. And they've got really stretchy nostrils, which doesn't sound quite as good, that they can close in a sandstorm. And then they have webbed feet. But they help them stop them from sinking in the sand, because certainly not going to need to do any swimming. And a light woolly coat to reflect the sun. Again, very similar to that fennec fox, that lighter colour reflects the sun. But it also can keep them cool during the day and warm at night. Right, so our next activity is a categorize. Hopefully you've seen this one before. This, you've got 60 seconds and we've got 8 sentences there. You need to sort out which ones will go with the xerophytes. Those are the plants that adapt their characteristics, and which ones go with this ephemerals, those plants that adapt their behavior. So those were the ones that we heard about that react when it rains. Right. Okay, Jim, can you put the timer on, please? Wonderful. Great. Well done. Yes. Well done. Lovely. Now remember, if you want to, you are playing on catch up, you can always pause it now if you haven't quite finished. But we're going to see what the answers are. Where are the answers? Here they are. Right. Okay. So therefore, our xerophytes, we've got spikes rather than leaves. That's obviously helping them to reduce transpiration, but it's also protecting them from those consumers that want to eat them. The large fleshy stems. We've got the thick waxy skin. So both of those things are storing water and they're able to keep that water inside them rather than losing it. The extensive root systems, we had those big tap roots and also the horizontal roots to spread out as far as possible to get as much water from when it does rain, and the white upper surface, which of course helps reflect the sun. The ephemerals, we heard they were the seeds lying dormant in the ground for many, many years, waiting for the next lot of rain. When it does rain, the plants go very, very quickly and they flower within a few days so they can spread their seeds, waiting for the next lot of rain. Okay, thank you. And I think I'm back over to Jacob now.
Yes, we are, and we have got a case study alert because we are looking at the Thar Desert. Now, a lot of people study the Thar Desert. It's one of the main case studies that are used. However, some people use alternative case studies, such as the Sahara Desert. But a lot of these temperatures that we're going to talk about for the Thar Desert are the exact same as what we will talk about in the other deserts. So even if this is not your case that you use, you can still use it to remind you of some of the key challenges that people in these regions and plants and animals in these regions face. So the Thar Desert suffers from extremely high temperatures, sometimes in excess of 50 degrees Celsius in the summer. Now that presents a lot of challenges for the people who habitat that area. Working outside in those temperatures can be extremely hard. I mean, I struggle when we get to 20 degrees in the UK, so I don't know how people do it at 50 degrees. So people who work in the primary industries of farming with their livestock need shade in order to protect themselves from that very intense sunlight. High rates of evaporation lead to severe water shortages. And again, that's going to affect a lot of the people that live in this area, but also it's going to affect the plants that live in the area as well. And it's a very serious issue, this lack of water supply for the Thar Desert. Now, population is growing very rapidly in the Thar Desert, which is found in the northwest of India, one of the sort of most rapidly developing countries, rapidly growing populations in the world. And because of this rapidly growing population, that demand for water is increasing. And also, developments of farming and other industry there is also leading to much higher water demand. Now, this sort of lack of water is due to very low annual rainfall, those high temperatures that leads to extremely fast rates and quick rates of evaporation, and also strong winds. Now, due to this being quite a large area, it is often very, very barren. It's got it's very much inaccessible. There's very few tarmac roads or actual proper road networks. Often they melt. Most of the tarmac, the temperatures there are too hot and they will melt and deform, or they are covered in sands. Often the best way to get around is via the classic camel. Um, and so public transport is often very, very limited. As we can see, there's an image there with a bus, obviously people on top of the bus, people in the bus. So often public transport, when it is available, is extremely busy. So these challenges can be put across the Sahara Desert, the Northwestern Desert in the United States. And they're universal, these challenges across a lot of our hot desert environments. So we're going to move on with some altered vowels, and I do believe that Suzanne, you are doing the altered vowels this time.
Oh yeah, back to me. Thank you. Okay, so if you've played this game before, you know exactly what you're going to see. But the vowels in these words that are going to be about the opportunities for human activity, the vowels are going to be changed. So let's just have a look at an example. Here we go. So this is the first one. So remember, it's all those vowels have been altered and they've been replaced with a different vowel. So you've got to think about a human activity, an economic development opportunity in deserts. So what do you think that word might be? Okay, if you're playing on live with us, you can pop it in the chat box. If not, if you're playing at home, just have a think about what you think it is if you're on catch up. Oh, Pink, you're very close. The second word is correct, but you need to just have a look at that first one. I see where you're coming from, though. Okay, Jim, should we have a reveal, please? This is called mineral extraction. So it's taking out those precious minerals that are worth selling for export to other countries or for using themselves in their industry. And we're going to look at that in a bit. Right, next one here. This one might be a little bit easier to guess which one this one is. Remember, it's the vowels that have been changed to an alternative vowel. So have a think what you think that might be. Another way we can develop and use the hot deserts for economic opportunities. Yes, well done. I've got it coming in the chat box. Let's have a reveal. It is indeed energy. So we can produce lots of energy, particularly solar power and wind power. Again, we'll have a look in a minute. Right, next one, please, Jim. Wonderful. Right. What's this one? These ones, if you see it straight away, it's really easy. So what do you think that might be? What economic opportunity? Yes, well done, Pink. You got it again. Wonderful. So that one's farming. And our final opportunity, what's that one? What do you think that one might be? Try and change some of those vowels to a different vowel. Right. Okay, Jim, should we have the reveal? This one is tourism. Right, so I think we're going to go to, a nice slide on mineral extraction. So we're going to have a look at some of these opportunities that there are. So the desert regions have a valuable reserves of minerals. I was actually looking at a map today of the Western Desert in the USA, and it's full of minerals and metals. But for this one here, the Thar Desert has got lots of reserves of minerals which are used all over India, but also exported all over the world. The most important minerals that come from the Thar Desert are gypsum, which is used for making plaster in the construction industry and in making cement. Feldspar, which is used to make ceramics. Phosphorite, which is used to make fertilizers, which again a very, very important export, and kaolin, which is used as whitener in paper. So you might find that actually some of your books you've got, a bit of kaolin has come from the Thar Desert. There are also valuable reserves of stone in the region. The Thar Desert is the main source of limestone for India's steel industry, as well as having valuable reserves of marble, which is used in the construction industry. So again, if you've got some marble in your house or somewhere around, or in a nice building that's been used with luxury materials, because marble was quite expensive, it might have come from the Thar Desert. Right, on to energy, please. So energy. The Thar Desert is a rich source of energy. There's coal. Okay, large and extensive lignite coal deposits in parts of the Thar Desert. as well as the discovery of a large oil field which could transform the local economy. Perhaps not so good for our climate. Additionally, there's huge potential for renewable energy. And recently, there's been a focus on developing wind power, which is, of course, a renewable form of energy. The Jaisalmer Wind Park was constructed in 2001, which is India's largest wind farm. Because it's got sunny and cloudless skies, this Thar Desert also offers ideal conditions for solar power generation, which can be used in water treatment in the area. Right, next one, please, Jim. So, farming. Now, this one you would think would be very, very challenging. And as in the case across most or many newly emerging economies like India, most of the people living in the Thar Desert are subsistence farmers. That means their farms are very small scale and they only grow enough for themselves and their families. So there's no food to sell, there's no cash crop to speak of. And they survive in those very, very hot and dry conditions by grazing their animals, their cattle, on some of the grassy areas. And they try to cultivate vegetables and fruit trees. However, there is slowly being a growth in commercial farming. And that's down to the reason that they've started to irrigate some of the arid landscape. So irrigation is a system of watering crops and plants. So drawing water from a water source and taking it directly to the plants and watering them where they are. In the late 1950s, the Indira Gandhi Canal was built, and that revolutionized farming in the Thar Desert. All of a sudden, crops that previously wouldn't have been able to grow because it was too dry, because the water was now being brought to them, they could start growing things like wheat and cotton in that area that used to be a really scrubby desert. Irrigation has also meant that farmers can produce a wider range of food like pulses, things like lentils, sesame, and maize, amongst many other things. So it's become a more productive area for agriculture as a result of irrigation. Without the irrigation, it wouldn't really be possible. Right, on to the next one, please, Jim. Thank you. Tourism. Okay, so the Thar Desert has got amazing scenery. I quite like the look of that camel and all his decorations. But despite its inaccessibility in places and extreme temperatures, tourists do go there, and it has become a really popular tourist destination. Every year, tens of thousands of people visit, particularly coming in across from Pakistan and elsewhere in India. And one of the biggest attractions there are camel safaris on offer from Jaisalmer. And they're really popular with overseas visitors as well as very wealthy Indians. And you can see in the background there, looks like there's quite a few people going on a bit of a tour. There is a desert festival that's held every winter, which is again extremely popular and will draw in crowds from far and wide. So this is really important for the local economy because it generates money, which then can be spent locally. So it stimulates what we call the multiplier effect. So local people will benefit because there'll be some jobs provided for them. They'll earn money, they spend their money locally, and really money then begins to flow into the system. Many of them, local people, will provide food for the tourists or also accommodation, or they'll act as guides or even rear and look after the camels. Right, I think we are on to the next slide. Right, I'm back over to you, Jacob.
Yes, it is. So we are going to have a go at on balance activity. Now, for those of you who haven't done on balance before, we need to look at advantages and disadvantages of tourism in hot deserts, but we need to make sure that we have got our scales balanced. So we're going to start off. I would like 2 advantages of development of tourism in hot deserts. Now, if you are someone who's watching on replay, then you can pause now, note a couple down, and then see if you got the same ones as us. Obviously, there's many different advantages of tourism in the hot deserts. Let's just see if we can get some examples of 2 in the chat there. So let's see. So thinking about the positives of developing tourism in hot desert areas, what are some of the positives? How can it benefit local people? How can it benefit nationally? Fantastic, Pink, coming in there with looking at the economics of the situation and think about how it's going to benefit the country's GDP. And wonderful Charlie there adding on to that and sort of increasing local incomes. So we can see our two advantages there. It provides jobs or extra income for local people. So again, just what Charlie talked about there with benefiting the local economy. But also, what's really, really good is it's an educational facility as well around ecotourism. So, increasing knowledge, the visitors' knowledge on the value of this pristine environment and the threats to this environment as well. Now, we are off balance at the minute, so we need to now think of two disadvantages of the development of tourism in hot deserts. So, let's get some fantastic answers in the chat. And again, pause if you are watching on replay to give yourself a little bit of time to think about it. Think about some of the negatives about tourism in these hot desert areas. Again, this is not anything specific to the Thar Desert. This could be, you could apply your own case study knowledge to it. So if you did Sahara Desert, for example, or if you've done the Western Desert, you can utilize your examples from there. But let's think of some of the disadvantages. That's all right if you're not too sure. This is what we're here for. We're here to make you sure. Okay. Well, let's get some answers on the screen because these are a little bit trickier. These disadvantages. Now we have got one that's really, really relevant here, and that is the fact that it is unreliable income. Having an economy that is very much dependent on tourism is a bit dangerous when global events, and we've just been over the last couple of years through a major global event that has really impacted tourism, and so that is sort of one of the big sort of one of the big challenges and disadvantages of having a reliance on tourism in an area. But also, we talked a little bit earlier about some of the challenges in terms of water stress. Having a load of tourists coming into your area is only going to increase water demand and therefore increase water stress in an area which has very little water. But also, there are environmental impacts. Humanity is known for not being the cleanest species, often leaving a little bit of destruction behind us in terms of littering and leaking fuel and stuff like that. And by not having tourists coming in a sustainable fashion could lead to long-term impacts on this pristine environment. Okay, so that's absolutely wonderful there. Remember, this on balance exercise is really important because for our longer answer questions, we often need to think about having a good balance. Just to answer your quick question there, Pink, why would visitors damage the environment? Some people might not be aware that they're damaging it, but by interrupting the natural ecosystem, they could cause damage to plants. They could leave litter behind, which can then obviously damage wildlife. It's unlikely that hopefully most people wouldn't damage, but people have been known to damage these environments when they have gone in there. They might not do it intentionally, they might do it intentionally. Okay, we're going to move on to desertification now. Now, desertification is one of the biggest challenges that areas are facing, these semi-arid areas that border on to deserts. Now, desertification is the process of semi-arid grasslands becoming more degraded and becoming drier and turning into desert environment. Now, the reason why desertification is something that a lot of people are worried about is because it's very, very difficult, near on impossible to, unless you have sort of human intervention, for land to go back into its original state. It's often almost a permanent change. Now, one of the areas that we're going to talk about is the Sahel, which is found south of the Sahara Desert in northern Africa. This is one of the areas that is facing desertification, but a lot of areas around the world are facing desertification because of climate change, and that is one of the big causes. Because of our changing climate, extremes of weather are much more likely now than ever before. We are getting increased risk of drought and rainfall not happening in these areas. And if we've got higher temperatures and less rainfall, then that's going to degrade the land very, very quickly. But we also have human causes as well. We have overpopulation, deforestation, overgrazing, overcultivation. People who are using this land in a non sustainable way. Now, population growth often leads to the other three that I've just talked about of deforestation, overgrazing, and overcultivation. We've got more people in an area that has more demand for food, more demand for land, more demand for resources in this area. Um, so farming often puts a lot of pressure on this land. If you are if you have a herd of cattle and you're using the same area to graze them, then that's going to remove all that vegetation from that area. That's going to leave that area very, very vulnerable to soil erosion. And that's where the land is breaking down, it's being eroded away, and then it's going to erode away into sand and therefore turn it into a desert. Um, but some of the other impacts are crop failure. If you are overcultivating it and you lose nutrients, then you might not have enough nutrients in this soil. And these soils are already of very poor quality anyway because they are very sandy. So that could lead to famine, which obviously has a big human impact on the semi nomadic people who live in these regions. Increased runoff, which means that water is being lost when the very little of it does fall, and can lead to conflict and also migration of people. Now, if we move on to the next slide, we can just take a look at some of the ways in which people are trying to manage and reduce the risk of desertification. Now, afforestation is one of the best ways to do this, and the example of the Great African Green Wall of Trees is a perfect example. This is going to span from Senegal in the west of Africa over to Eritrea in the east of Africa. It's going to be one of the biggest natural projects ever created, and it's going to basically grow loads of trees which are going to help bind the soil together, provide shade, help alter the microclimate to be a little bit more moisture, and to reduce sort of drying out. And reduce this advance of desertification and also reclaim some of the land that has been lost. Now, this is happening in the Sahel. It's already underway. It's projected to be complete in the next decade or so. There has been some issues with trees not surviving, but hopefully they are starting to use sort of more indigenous techniques. Now, this is also being used in another area in the Thar Desert, I do believe, where they are doing a similar project, just not on as large of a scale as what we see in the Great Green Wall of Africa. We can also look at water and soil management. So, drip irrigation using appropriate technology to make sure that water is being trapped and kept into the land to again boost up the quality of those soils and make sure that that land isn't being sort of over cultivated and degrading in quality. This is as simple as building low stone walls to prevent soil from being washed away and to just trap that water and slow down that water so it doesn't run off as quickly as what it can. And again, trying to just minimize that water loss through evaporation as well. Now, we're going to move on to some exam practice with Suzanne, where we're going to look at a 3-mark question.
Great, thank you. So here we go. Suggest how the hot desert climate might affect biodiversity. So all good geographers will bug the question. So we're going to box the command word. B stands for box the command word. Oh, thank you. Then underline the keywords. So suggest is our command word, and that means give a give a possible case. That's AQA's definition. And also, one of the words we need to think about is biodiversity. What does that mean? Well, that actually means the variety of life in a particular habitat in this context. So we've got to think about how does the desert climate, and we know it's very hot, it's very dry, how might that affect the variety of life that we find there? Now, we did find that things lived there, but it actually has a very low biodiversity. The low rainfall that it receives has a real knock-on effect on all the things that can live there. They need to be very specialised, and you can't have a very large number of species living there. Remember, any rain that does fall, we have very high evaporation rates. So it doesn't really remain in the desert. It gets evaporated as soon as the sun comes out during the day. Also remember that the hot desert has quite kind of cold and hot diurnal range, that diurnal variation. Right, if we can just have a look at the next slide, please. Thank you. So because this is a 3 marker, the examiners want to see at least sort of one idea that you've got an elaboration or a chain of reasoning from. So thinking about this, we know that the climate is really harsh, it's really extreme. We've got really low rainfall, potentially below 250 millimeters a year. Some areas can actually go for very long periods without rain, potentially years actually before they see rain. And as I said, that extreme climate really does impact on low biodiversity. There are far fewer species that can specialize enough to survive because they need to develop really niche adaptations to cope. Now, really primarily because of the lack of rain, we have less productivity of plants. And as you know, plants are really the basis of life on Earth. So because we don't have many plants growing very, very quickly because they're limited by the amount of water that they have available, this links into the food chain. So there's going to be less food available for the primary consumers. And of course, those primary consumers are fewer in number, so there's going to be fewer secondary consumers. So really, when we're thinking about biodiversity here, that low rainfall particularly impacts on the number of species that can be supported in this ecosystem. So remember, 3 marks, they're looking for one idea with elaboration. Sometimes the mark schemes will accept more than one idea. You can give 2, maybe 3 ideas, and each one of these will be point marked because this will be a point marked question at 3 marks. Right, going over, I think you've got some MCQs now.
Wonderful, yeah. So we're going to finish off some quick fire multiple choice questions. So our first question, question 1, which term is often used to describe the type of hot desert plant which are adapted to store water in their structure? Is it A, coniferous, B, succulents, C, deciduous, or D, non-deciduous? So let's see if we can get some answers in the chat. Going to be very quick fire, 10 seconds or so. So which one of these desert plants do we talk about when they store water within their structure? Obviously linking it back to that very, very dry environment, the very arid environment. Okay, wonderful. Pink coming in with the right answer. Let's get the answer on the board. It is B, succulents. Now, many of you might have succulents at home. They are a very common household plant. You don't water them very often because they store all that water that they get within their leaves and within their structure. Okay, let's go on to question 2 then. So, apart from discouraging hungry or thirsty animals, which of the following is a function of the spines on a cactus? Is it A, protection from sand particles, B, insulation from solar radiation, C, insulation from heat loss at night, or D, protection from fire? So you can just pop the letter into the chat there. Let's get some answers going. So which one is it going to be? A, B, C, or D? What is a second function of those spines on a cactus? Okay, another couple of seconds. And let's get the answer up on the board there. So it is C. It is the insulation from heat loss at night. It's trying to reduce the amount of that sort of on that diurnal variation there. Okay, we'll go to question 3 then. So very, very quick fire. Apart from hearing, what is the main reason why some desert animals, such as the Saharan fennec fox, have large ears? Is A, to enhance heat loss from body, B, to look attractive to other foxes, C, to frighten away predators, or D, to stun their prey? So let's get some answers in the chat. We'll give 10 seconds or so. I remember Suzanne. This is one of Suzanne's favourite animals, the fennec fox. They are adorably cute. So wonderful pink.
I've got one at home, Jacob. I didn't mention it. We've got one.
Oh, of course, of course. Okay, let's get the answer up on the board there. It is A. Those big ears serve a purpose, and it is to enhance that heat loss from the body because there's so many blood vessels close to the surface. It helps keep them just a little bit cool. Okay, we're going to question 4 then. Now, golden moles live in hot deserts such as the Kalahari Desert in Africa. They have non-functioning eyes. They are sightless. They operate at night. What is this behavior called? Is it A, vernal, B, autumnal, C, diurnal, or D, nocturnal? Now, many teenagers out there might get described this term as well if they stay up far too late at night. So what do we call it when an animal only comes out at night and only operates at night? Let's get some answers in the chat. So another 5 seconds or so. Hey, wonderful answers coming through there. Okay, let's get the answer up on the screen. I think everyone's going to know this one. It is nocturnal. Absolutely wonderful there. So again, probably something that you're very familiar with from biology, potentially. Now let's move on to our last one then. So question 5. So in hot deserts, some darkling beetles can trap water from moisture in the air to drink. What process do they rely on to capture the water? Is it A, transpiration, B, evaporation, C, condensation, or D, evapotranspiration? Let's get some answers in the chat box. And again, if you're watching on replay, you can pause, and if you're struggling a little bit, have a guess. So let's see, A, B, C, or D. Another 5 seconds or so. Okay, some wonderful answers coming through there. It is C, condensation. Okay, so it is same as when you sort of blow on, so like breathe onto your glasses. When that moisture from your breath condenses onto that cold surface, that is exactly what the beetles are doing because they want those lovely water droplets so that they can have a nice little drink. And that takes us to the end.
Wow. We've packed a
can
lot in
tell-
there, Suzanne,
yeah,
Jacob.
You can tell Vicky wrote it because it's packed full of wonderful information.
Oh,
So
fantastic.
she might not be
I tell
here
you
with
what-
us now, but she's here with us in spirit.
Oh, to your right. Well, she's not dead. But
No.
she's. I tell you what, those golden moles, they shouldn't go to Specsavers, should they? Because they.
Don't need to.
Anyway,
No.
breaking news. I've just had a text from a friend, and he tells
Yes.
me, let me read it out here. He says, it is absolutely impossible for a river to flow through a desert. I reckon he's in denial. What do you think?
Oh.
Hey? No, I've got a question for you, Jacob. I've got a question for you. It's a geography question. What did the camel say when he met his mate on a camel safari?
I don't know.
Long time no see. There we go. A double helping of extreme
We knew it was going to happen, but
hot deserts at the end of a fantastic session.
I was waiting for the dessert joke, though.
Oh no, I don't do obvious jokes, Suzanne. I tell you what, that is absolutely fantastic. We've packed in so much there in terms of the hot desert environment.
Yeah.
There, that is really, really useful, and of course, a chance if students want to go back over that content, particularly the exam technique stuff at the end there. Yeah. Really, really good stuff. And of course, if you go to tutor2.net/live and select the GCSE Geography drop downs from the replay section, I think there's a best part of 30 or 40 now sessions that Jacob and Suzanne and Vicky and the team have put together. So loads of opportunity to go through those for some revision ahead of summer exams. We will be back soon. We're taking a couple of weeks off whilst we go on tour with our GCSE Geography and other grade booster workshops. So if you get a chance to join us live at a cinema near you for some GCSE Geography revision, come and say hello. We're coming to London, I know, and pretty sure we're coming to Birmingham as well.
Birmingham and then London again.
Yeah. So if you get a chance to join us, that'd be amazing. Suzanne and Vicky, I know, are definitely going to be doing some of those sessions. And
I'm doing all of them, I think.
Yeah, well,
I will be there for all of them.
It's going to be great. So we look forward to seeing you. If it's not live at the cinema, hopefully we'll join you with Jacob and Suzanne and the team for another live session coming up soon. So as always, huge thanks to our two experts, not me, Suzanne and Jacob. And all the best with your study. We'll see you soon.
Bye.
see you later.
Cheers.